Hello and welcome to today's edition of World Today. Ukraine has begun its fourth year of the all-out war with Russia. While the world is watching what America's policy would be under President Trump, Europe is worried. And amid such worries, French President Macron is in Washington, D.C. The two presidents are in a bilateral meeting even as we speak. Macron is expected to cover the prospects of ending the Ukraine war amid stark differences on how to proceed. There's also a joint statement that's expected in a couple of hours from now, and we'll be bringing you all the details on that front as well. Meanwhile, the next European leader to call on President Trump is UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. He will be in Washington, D.C. on Thursday. While all eyes are on Washington, D.C., a slew of European world leaders were in the Ukrainian capital city of Kyiv for a summit to find a road ahead today. Unsure of whether they could rely any longer on their staunchest ally, the United States of America. After Riyadh talks last week, where both Ukraine and Europe were sidelined while US and Russia tried to formulate a peace process. This is Europe's last-ditch attempt to get its old ally back on board in a diplomatic war against Russian invasion of Ukraine.
The war in Ukraine remains the most central and consequential crisis for Europe's future. Putin is trying harder than ever to win the war on the ground. His goal remains Ukraine's capitulation, and we know what could happen next, because it has already happened before. It is not only the destiny of Ukraine that is at stake, it is Europe's destiny that is at stake.
The international system is going through a tectonic shift, and the human rights edifice we have built up so painstakingly over decades has never been under so much strain. Today we mark the third anniversary of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine at a time of escalating civilian casualties, continued wanton destruction of urban areas, and speculation about the war's trajectory. Any sustainable peace must be anchored in the rights, needs and aspirations of the Ukrainian people, in accountability and in the principles of the United Nations Charter and international law.
While this is the third anniversary of the Ukraine-Russia war, there has been escalation with drone attacks from the Russian side. Leaders talk and try to find a peace formula. It's a war that kills and maims people, yet they refuse to give up. Russian President Vladimir Putin waits for a talk with US President Donald Trump, and the war is now in its fourth year and more than 1,000 days old.
Ти маєш тримати своїм тілом, максимально береш виклики і бореться.
Andriy Rubliuk doesn't know how long his clinical death lasted after an explosive detonated beneath him. He's an Ukrainian intelligence soldier injured in the war 2 years ago.
I approached the ammunition that was supposed to destroy and realized that it had been blown away. I realized that I had been blown up. I realized that life would change forever in this moment. I didn't lose consciousness. I didn't lose it immediately. I still remember how the boys loaded me into the car and how incredibly painful it was.
2 years later, Rubliuk is back in the war zone. Dressed in military fatigues, his missing limbs replaced by prosthetics. Hooks in place of fingers. One leg firmly planted on an artificial limb. And like Ukraine's 380,000 war wounded, he is fighting Russian invasion.
Ukraine is not the country you can conquer in 3 days. The Russians couldn't break us in 300 years. They tried, but they couldn't.
3 роки, як Київ за 3 дні.
Russians won't get Kyiv neither in 3 days nor in 3 years. They will never get Kyiv. We are strong and we are absolutely unbreakable nation.
Я даже не знаю, що.
So the Russians should not dream about Kyiv in 3 days.
Немає слів, тому що ми перебували постійно тут, ми нікуди не виїжджали.
24th February 2022. When the Russian invasion started, it was supposed to be a quick military operation, and the Kremlin believed it would be over in 3 days.
Ratified by the Russian parliament on the February 22, I decided to conduct a special military operation. It aims to protect people who have been bullied and subjected to genocide by the Kiev regime for 8 years.
Instead, 3 years have passed by. Russia, cornered with sanctions, wants to take the olive branch forwarded by Donald Trump, and Ukraine wants NATO membership, even at the cost of Zelensky stepping down from his elected post of presidency.
This year must become the year of the beginning of the real and reliable peace. Putin will not gift us this peace, nor will he give it away in exchange for something.
Russian President Vladimir Putin was presented with a sword and shield on the 3rd anniversary of the Ukraine invasion by Russia's Grand Mufti. Since 24th February 2022, Vladimir Putin has ordered tens of thousands of Russian troops into Ukraine, triggering Europe's largest land war since World War II. Bureau Report, India Today.
Now, there have been bilateral talks between the United States of America and Russia, as also between America and Ukraine. Now, let's quickly look at what's on the table from Russia and Ukraine for a peace talk. Russia wants sanctions lifted, and the area of Ukraine that it now occupies should remain with it. While Moscow might not object to Ukraine joining the European Union per se, a membership of NATO is absolutely unacceptable to the Kremlin, nor is it willing to accept any peacekeeping force from Europe or the West in Ukraine. On the other hand, Ukraine wants NATO membership, and President Zelensky has even offered to resign from his post in return. Kyiv wants a ceasefire and withdrawal of Russian troops from its land, restoration of its border prior to the 2014 Crimean annexation, release of prisoners and children deported to Russia, according to Ukrainian authorities. To discuss all this and more, I'm being joined by Sergei Strokin, a senior journalist from Moscow. Sergei, before I could come to you, let me just bring in some news that's just coming in. The United Nations has adopted a resolution from Ukraine and European countries to ensure withdrawal of Russian troops. What do you make of this? This is not the first time, Sergei, that we're seeing a UN resolution stacked up against Russia, seeking Russian withdrawal of troops. Is this an act of desperation? Should they be looking at the United Nations at this point in time, or looking at US as to what US is going to do?
Well, to me, the vote in the United Nations came as no surprise, as we're in the midst of the information war, which is far from being over. But if you look at the number of the countries which abstained and voted against, that's quite a big number of countries. It means that a pendulum is swinging in opposite direction. And what is striking this year, that United States abstained from supporting this anti-Russian resolution, which was sponsored by Ukraine and US Western allies. It means that there's some fundamental shift in the position of United States after the change of command in White House. And it seems that current American administration is revamping the whole Ukrainian conflict. Let me add to that if we look at the wording, we see that American administration is no more using terms as aggression, invasion, which were used in your report, by the way, as well as Prime Minister Modi is also not using this language. So I suggest not to use it today.
Right.
Yeah,
Sergey,
yeah,
but
okay.
if I could just come to you on America's strategy, is America a reliable partner? That's a question that a lot of countries are asking, including India. In a war where Trump is going to look at what serves American interests, is America going to be a reliable partner in this war where they do not want to enter? The war is the reason why they're staying away.
Well, that's $1 million question, and expert community here, political pundits as well as political and public figures are split. There are two patterns, two ways of thinking. One saying that this is a window of opportunity to start a new dance with Americans and try to use this chance, as nothing is written in stone, as you know. Never say never. So we have to probably use this chance, but others argue that we should not trust America, that Trump, you can't trust Trump, that he's unpredictable, and that Russian-American rivalry is deep-seated and it can't be changed overnight. So I will be frank with you, there's no one opinion here, but what is clear is that while we are still awash in anti-Western rhetoric, the fundamental difference is that we no more use the term so-called collective West, which was a part of Russia's media landscape even a couple of months back. Today,
it's 3 years now to the war. Sergey, I'd just like to ask, 3 years now since the conflict between Russia and Ukraine began. What's the plan from here on? Russia is in an advantageous position. What is Russia willing to give or take to have peace between the two countries? What are the red lines and non-negotiables here? Does Zelensky have to go?
Yes, absolutely. Russia is gaining momentum. It's expanding its strategic offensive in the zone of the conflict. But Russia's problem is now how to convert the military gains, which are obvious, which can't be denied, into a settlement which would fit Russia's understanding of the basic goals of military special operations 3 years after it was started. So the devil is in details, and a lot would depend on the basic terms and conditions which would be negotiated. Talking about red lines, what can be non-starter for Russia is Ukrainian joining NATO, but as I understand, this is not the case anymore, as President Trump made himself clear that he is not considering that. Also, another non-starter would be deploying some forces close to Russia's borders, which would threaten Russia's security as it is happening now, when we are shelled by the Western missiles, our regions like Kursk and Belgorod and other regions. So almost every day we witness those attacks. Innocent civilians are killed, so we can't tolerate that, obviously, and we have to wipe that out. Yeah. So yes, but at the same time, we are well aware that any negotiations, that's a sort of a bargaining. So I can't go beyond that. Let us wait for the negotiations to start, and then we will see how it proceeds.
Right. Sergey Sorokin, thank you so much for joining us. We are monitoring this story very, very closely and hope to have you back on World Today to discuss what's happening on the ground in Moscow. With that, we're shifting focus to another very important development coming in from Europe. Germany has voted, and the results mark a historic shift. For the first time since World War II, the tide has turned against post-war consensus. Mainstream conservatives, led by Friedrich Merz, have won the national election, while the far-right alternative for Germany, that's AfD, has nearly doubled its support, an outcome unimaginable since the fall of Nazi Germany. Since this is the far-right, the firewall has indeed been breached. The far-right AfD has secured 20.8% of the vote, cementing its place as Germany's second-largest political party. Just before the elections, Merz sought AfD's backing to pass a strict immigration motion. a significant departure from his party's long-standing position. This move marks a historic breach of what has been known as the AfD firewall. Since the end of World War II and the horrors of the Holocaust, Germany's mainstream political parties have maintained a firm consensus. The far right must never be allowed into government. That firewall has now fallen. And the question remains, how far will Merz go in aligning with the far right to push his nationalist agenda? Now in America, people are protesting against Elon Musk and his diktats, but the US President Donald Trump, backs him completely. After the latest email by Musk as head of Department of Government Efficiency or DOGE, asking federal workers to list their accomplishments for the week in an email, President Trump used a meme to mock federal workers outraged by the email. There are protests going on. Even the conservatives now are holding, while Democrats are fighting a lawsuit to push back Trump and Musk on their orders. Here's a report.
President Donald Trump and DOGE head Elon Musk face significant backlash, even in strongly Republican areas. At a town hall in its conservative northern Georgia district, Republican U.S. Representative Rich McCormick faced catcalls and boos as he attempted to defend Musk's assault on the federal bureaucracy.
From a conservative perspective, the approach of DOGE is completely 180 degrees. They've been indiscriminate and they've taken a chainsaw to these things. We've seen that with workers from the nuclear workers, the NNSA, our nuclear stockpile, and CDC workers working on the bird flu being fired by DOGE and then having to be rehired when someone realizes, oh gosh, we need those people. Why is a supposedly conservative party taking such a radical and extremist and sloppy approach to this?
Show me what democracy looks like! This is what democracy looks like!
The unprecedented and frantic effort to slash the federal workforce, pushing tens of thousands of workers out of their roles, has started a series of protests across America.
Elon Musk has got to go!
Protesters contend that the Department of Government Efficiency under Musk has been given too much power and urged Congress to intervene and push back on decisions Musk and Trump have made. A coalition of mostly Democratic-led 19 U.S. states filed a lawsuit to stop DOGE from accessing government systems used to process trillions of dollars in payments.
No one elected Elon. He's not been subject to any vetting. He's not been subject to any conflicts of interest. He has earned $20 billion over the last decade. He's the richest person in the world. And he has caused harm and injury to Americans. And that's why we are here today, to seek a preliminary injunction.
But none of the protests or lawsuits can hinder Elon Musk. On 22nd February, he put out a post on X saying that all federal employees will have to report their activities or risk being fired. The US president has urged billionaire Elon Musk to be more aggressive in his efforts to shrink the federal government despite uproar over layoffs and deep spending cuts.
We, the people, defend the Constitution.
Bureau Report, India Today.
The US aid funding row triggers a fierce face-off between the Bharatiya Janata Party and the Congress, days after Trump accused US aid of giving India $21 million to enhance voter turnout. The Finance Ministry's report debunks charges and says over $750 million in funds were used in welfare schemes. The Congress claims vindication with this report, accusing the BJP of peddling US misinformation.
The war of words over US aid funding rages on. Days after US President Donald Trump claimed $21 million were given to aid India's voter turnout.
$21 million going to my friend, Prime Minister Modi in India, for voter turnout.
The Finance Ministry released a report on the US aid funding in India so far. The report claims US aid funded 7 projects amounting to $750 million in 2023-24 with a $97 million obligation for the projects in financial year 2024. The Finance Ministry report says the funds were not used for voter turnout, but rather for agriculture, water, food security schemes, among other welfare programs. US aid has so far provided $17 billion as aid to India in over 555 projects since its formation. The Congress claims they stand vindicated with the Finance Ministry report, accusing the Prime Minister and his ministers of lying.
Every day the BJP says a different thing. They keep changing the goalpost. It is very clear that the BJP are relying upon falsehoods and propaganda.
Trump says 21 million to India. Entire BJP, entire RSS, and half of media starts dancing to his tunes. Trump says, Washington Post says, no, it didn't come to India. Stunned silence. Indian Express says, no, it went to Bangladesh. Stunned silence. Then Trump says, I gave it to my friend. US gave it to my friend Narendra Modi. Stunned silence.
The BJP denied the charge, claiming the Congress is not only defending US aid funds, but they were routed through George Soros-linked fronts. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar called the charges made by Trump concerning and says facts will soon come out.
US aid was allowed here in good faith to do good faith activities. Now suggestions are being made out of America that there are activities which are in bad faith. So it surely warrants a look. And if there is something to it, I think the country should know who are the people involved in the bad faith activities.
This fierce showdown comes after Trump made several statements accusing US aid of giving funds to enhance India's voter turnout and that it was used as a kickback scheme.
And $21 million for voter turnout in India. Why are we caring about India turnout? We got enough problems. We want our own turnout, don't we? Can you imagine all that money going to India? I wonder what they think when they get it. Now, it's a kickback scheme. You know, it's not like they get it and they spend. They kick it back to the people that send it, I would say, in many cases, many of these cases.
Meanwhile, heads roll at the US aid as Trump is on a warpath, sacking over 2,000 workers. Bureau Report, India Today.
Now it's time for a quick check on some other international stories making headlines in World at a Glance.
Prayers are being conducted for Pope Francis, who's battling double pneumonia and remains in a critical condition. The Pope was admitted to Rome's Gemelli Hospital on February 14th after having breathing trouble for several days, and subsequently he was diagnosed with pneumonia in both lungs. According to the Vatican, Pope Francis had a good Sunday night in hospital and slept and is resting well. India and Britain have decided to resume talks on a proposed trade agreement. Indian Trade Minister Piyush Goyal said the countries will look to speed up negotiations. Goyal was speaking at a joint press conference with British Business and Trade Secretary Jonathan Reynolds, who is in India to restart negotiations. India and UK trade negotiations were halted last year ahead of general elections in both the countries. Police and firefighters were stationed around the Russian consulate in the French city of Marseille after 2 projectiles were thrown at the perimeter wall, one of which exploded, according to a French security source. It was not immediately clear if the projectiles cleared the wall. BFM TV said that the projectiles were Molotov cocktails and that they landed in the consulate garden. Russia has demanded a full French investigation and said the incident looked like an act of terrorism. Dhaka has invited tech billionaire Elon Musk to visit Bangladesh and launch Starlink satellite service there. In a letter written to Musk, Bangladesh's chief advisor Professor Mohammad Yunus said that integrating Starlink's connectivity into the country's infrastructure will have a transformational impact on its youth and women.
That's all in this edition of World Today. We'll be back same time tomorrow with all the global headlines. Goodbye and take care.